a resolution to the Iowa football discriminatory lawsuit, which has been ongoing for over 2 years, albeit a resolution that will not make many football fans, many Iowa football fans, or taxpayers here in the state of Iowa too happy. We'll talk about it in just a moment. But first, I want to thank Ascent Nutrition. Use that code Hawkeyes, plural, code Hawkeyes at goascentnutrition.com. They've got some great new mushroom products. They've also got their mold and mycotoxin-free coffee, their algae oil DHA, which will help you feel clear and cognitive. Who doesn't need to feel more clear and mentally focused? And also their pine pollen powder. It's all available at goascentnutrition.com. Again, use that code Hawkeyes for 15% off your order. And also Iowa floor covering. The guys down at IFC in Bondurant. If you're undergoing a project, consider this Tough Core Click Together 4.5 millimeter waterproof vinyl flooring that's available at just $269 per foot. And in a world full of inflation and just cost of living going up, you need to save everywhere you can. And you're, of course, benefiting more than just yourself, but you're saving yourself money. Again, visit iowafloorcovering.com/DIY for more information. Again, that's iowafloorcovering.com/DIY. So the University of Iowa has reached a $4.175 million settlement with a number of former football players who complained of discriminatory actions while they were enrolled at Iowa. I'm here to kind of give you a summary of what happened. I appreciate Chad Leistico of the Des Moines Register. He, I believe, was on this story right away. Rob Sand, his team, the State of Iowa Auditor, actually released a press release just before 9 a.m., and I think Chad Leistico had something up by 9:20, so give Chad and his team credit for jumping on this. But here are the details of the story. I think we can kind of narrate this a bit. This is a settlement in the amount of $4.175 million. Now, the Iowa Department of Management's State Appeal Board voted 2-1 in favor of the payout, which means that the state of Iowa taxpayers will be forced to pay $2 million toward this settlement. So we always hear about how the University of Iowa, the football program specifically, funds itself through football money. And in the past, the football program, it's my understanding that the football program has supported its own rear ends as it relates to lawsuits and payouts. But in this case, the state of Iowa will have to foot $2 million of this $4.175 million total. So taxpayers will pay $2 million. The other portion, the $2.175 million, will be picked up by Iowa athletics. So let that sink in for a second. Chad Leistico of the Des Moines Register bringing up the fact that approximately $1.9 million of the settlement will go to attorney fees. And 12 different athletes are included on this settlement, including former Hawkeyes Akram Wadley, Aaron Menz, Cavante Martin Manley. All those guys are getting paid approximately $184,000. Each one of those players will get north of $184,000 as a result of this settlement. Now, I mentioned that the Iowa Department of Management State Appeal Board voted 2-1 on this Monday in favor of this $2 million payout, which is, again, approximately half of the total settlement between the University of Iowa, the Board of Regents, and the 12 players and their attorneys. Here's what Rob Sand, the State of Iowa Auditor Rob Sand, had to say this morning, and that's what kind of prompted this whole discussion. And really, Rob Sand, I believe his official press release is what tipped off people to this story. This is what a pair of press releases stated that was released through that office of the Auditor of State. It stated this morning, dated March 6th, State Auditor Rob Sand today announced that he will vote against taxpayer funds being used to pay half of a discrimination lawsuit against the University of Iowa Athletic Department during Director Gary Barta's tenure, unless Barta is no longer employed by the department. If approved by the State Appeal Board, the settlement would cost Iowa taxpayers $2 million. The lawsuit, filed by 12 Black U of I football players in November 2020, is the fourth discrimination lawsuit against the department in less than 9 years. Auditor Sand will further explain his position at the following news conference, which took place this morning at approximately 10:30 a.m. He went on to say in a separate release, under Gary Barta's leadership at the University of Iowa Athletics Department, we've had Peter Gray scandal plus 3 instances of discrimination totaling nearly $7 million in damages, setting aside other suits. After the largest settlement, Barta asserted no wrong was done. Now we have a new matter for $4 million more, and for the first time, they want part paid from the taxpayers' general fund, even though they now collect tens of millions annually through the Big Ten TV deal. Enough is enough. Clear personal accountability is necessary. I will not support taxpayers funding the settlement unless Gary Barta is no longer employed at the university and forfeits any severance or similar pay. I encourage you to join me. Real accountability will help prevent discrimination, protecting both taxpayers and future victims. And of course, this was a letter to the other members of that state appeal board. Again, Rob Sand is one of 3 members on that board. The board ended up, after this release, after this letter from Rob Sand, the board ended up voting 2-1 in favor of paying out the $2 million portion of the over $4 million settlement. So I'm not here to give you commentary about what I think about Rob Sand's stance on this. I'm simply telling you this is what Rob Sand's stance on this is. I will say, following the article from the Des Moines Register, Gary Barta did release a statement to the Des Moines Register. And if you've ever heard of the term fluff or malarkey, it's what Gary Barta said. And this, you might as well just, I mean, I could have made this statement in about 2 minutes, maybe with the help, especially with the help of a PR person or a lawyer. Gary Barta said, and I quote, "The athletic department remains committed to providing an inclusive and welcoming environment for every student athlete and staff member involved in our program. The Hawkeyes' overarching goal is to win every time we compete, graduate every student athlete that comes to Iowa, and to do it right remains our focus." Yeah, I was surprised by that. See, I thought Iowa's goal was to not compete to win every time, not graduate every student athlete, and to not do it right, to do it wrong. I thought that was the main objective here. You might pick up on some sarcasm. Yeah, just a fluff statement. Gary Barta understands here that the situation is pretty clear. Rob Sand called for Gary Barta's job. From what I know, Rob Sand is a Hawkeye fan, so he may be the state of Iowa auditor, but he's also a Hawkeye fan. And a lot of Hawkeye fans are probably rallying behind what Rob Sand said, but it doesn't seem like it's going to matter because the board already voted 2-1 in favor of helping this lawsuit pay out. And it appears now that Kirk Ferentz, Brian Ferentz, and the staff that was accused in this, that they're fully off the hook. I know a lot of people felt like this lawsuit was a big money grab. I can't argue that. I'm certainly not there behind closed doors. Was there wrongdoing that permeated the Iowa football locker room and practice facility prior to 2020? I'm sure there was, right? The Hush Blackwell report that was done after those initial accusations arose indicated that there was maybe some bullying, and whether it was racially motivated or not, there was certainly mistreatment of some players. There was documented mistreatment of white players as well. I think of the situation with Seth Wallace and Jay Kallenberger. That has been well documented. Again, these are all allegations. What actually happened, what didn't happen, I'm sure you would get two different sides to all of these stories, depending on who you talk to, maybe more than 2 sides to all of these stories. But there's no question there's been some misconduct, I'm sure. But does that mean that the players deserve $184,000 plus? And according to Chad Leistigo, they're also able to get their postgraduate degrees at a different school if they want to, and Iowa's responsible for paying for those post-grad degrees. Whether or not that's fair, whether you think it's worth that, I'm not here to tell you one way or the other, but that's the reality of the situation. And, I mean, Kirk Ferentz, a very interesting statement from Kirk following this news. He stated, and I quote, "I'm greatly disappointed in how this legal matter was resolved. However, I'm grateful for the many players, parents, donors, fans, and others who remain supportive of our coaches and program during this time. The settlement negotiations took place between Plaintiffs' Counsel and the Iowa Attorney General's Office, which represents the University of Iowa and the Board of Regents. These discussions took place entirely without the knowledge or consent of the coaches who were named in the lawsuit. In fact, the parties originally named disagree with the decision to settle, fully believing that the case would have been dismissed with prejudice before trial. A motion for summary judgment was filed, which outlined why the case should have been dismissed. Unfortunately, the settlement was reached between the plaintiff's attorneys and the Iowa Attorney General's office before the judge had an opportunity to rule on the motion. We have been told the reason for the settlement is financial. As a part of the settlement, the coaches named were dismissed from the lawsuit, and there is no admission of any wrongdoing. For more than 2 years, our program has been unfairly and negatively impacted by these allegations. Members of the staff had their character and reputation tarnished by former players of our team who said things, then recanted many statements when questioned under oath. Today, we move forward. My focus is entirely on the players, coaches, and staff as we prepare for the 2023 season. So according to Kirk Ferentz, this settlement was not something he was aware was going to occur, but it was a financial decision by the Iowa Attorney General's office. And again, they had the backing of these other members of this state appeal board on this Monday who voted on it. Again, this had began to transpire late last month, it sounds like, and now things go official. Now, Rob Sand, State of Iowa Auditor Rob Sand, did give some reaction following that decision, the 2-1 decision for the state of Iowa to pitch in $2 million to the settlement. Rob released this, and I quote, "I am disappointed Iowa taxpayers will have to pay nearly half of a $4.175 million settlement, especially in light of the fact that this is the 4th discrimination suit implicating the University of Iowa Athletic Department in less than 9 years, all while under the watch of Athletic Director Gary Barta. In addition to milking taxpayers, this settlement does nothing to discourage a pattern of discrimination that may cost hardworking Iowans even more in the future. Enough is enough. Iowans should not have to foot the bill for repeated bad behavior." And again, I am not here to comment on Rob Sand's decision. Obviously, he is, or his, I should say, his stance. Obviously, Sand feels that Gary Barta should be fired for certain reasons. You know where I stand on the Gary Barta situation. And part of that is Gary Barta's inability to manage funding, right? Manage money. And he is part of that process the university has failed in over the course of the last, 9 years. And we're talking the Tracy Griesbaum lawsuit. We're talking the Chris Doyle dismissal and $1.1 million payout. I mean, you just go down the list, and Rob Sand listed some of those situations earlier in his first release. But it's also his inability, or maybe his refusal, to properly oversee the football program, which is the most important program to the Iowa Athletic Department. Kirk Ferentz does rule that program, whether you like Kirk Ferentz or not. Kirk Ferentz is the head rooster in that athletic department, and there is very little to no oversight over what he does. And it's fascinating that Gary Barta has been allowed to continue mismanagement of funds, and there has not been more pushback from oversight within the University of Iowa. Now, will Barbara Wilson, the president of Iowa, step in and do something in response to this? I doubt it, but I don't know that. But again, that's my reason for my stance on Gary Barta. It's all of those things. I have no reason to think somebody else who's qualified couldn't raise the same amount of money that Gary Barta raises for the athletic department. That's what everybody always falls back on. Well, he's a good fundraiser. Well, some have said a monkey could go into that university and raise money. Not to say that Gary Barta is a monkey. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying it's not hard to raise money for that football program or for that athletic department. And you got a lot of passionate donors and a lot of passionate alums. And the bottom line is Gary Barta has done a poor job with PR, with management of funds, with oversight. And I've been calling for him to be gone well before anything happened with this settlement. But the bottom line is yet another payout, over $4 million, regardless of if you believe the players, you don't believe the players, whose side you're on. I'm not really on anybody's side. I'm not blaming the players if they were mistreated. That's wrong. But I also don't know that it deserves a $184,000 payment per player and a $4.175 million settlement. So it is what it is, folks. I'm guessing things will slow down on this front. Will there be more news? We'll have to wait and see what that is. I guess if you want to relate this back to just football, Brian Ferentz is still at the University of Iowa. And if Gary Barta somehow leaves or retires early or is fired, that would perhaps affect the future for Brian Ferentz, right? If they get someone in there who's not a puppet, who is willing to make decisions and not just bow to what Kirk Ferentz wants every year, then perhaps you get a change there down the road. But in the interim, this is what we have. Gary Barta is still the athletic director, and the players have been paid a pretty large sum of money in response to this 2.5-year lawsuit. Appreciate you tuning in for another segment, folks. Wanted to just run through all that. Again, I'm not taking a stance on one side or the other. I've made my feelings on Gary Barta quite clear. And again, we'll see what happens from here on out. The university has settled with those former players for an amount of $4.175 million in total, approximately $2.2 million of which will go straight to those 12 players. Appreciate you tuning in, folks. We will talk to you tomorrow. I've got a live bracketology show coming up tomorrow with a couple of special guests. 2:30 p.m. Central Time, folks. Live show right here. Bracketology special as we talk Big Ten tournament and the big picture of March Madness coming up live 2:30 p.m. on Tuesday, 2:30 p.m. Central Time on Tuesday. We'll talk to you then.